I know that the Chinese homework assignment for most of my classes has been one of the most difficult homework assignments to actually accomplish. But when I think about the Chinese takeout idea, I think it's ingenious. One of the really important things about being an artist is to actually paint and record our time. And things like Chinese takeout is not only just Chinese, I mean, we think about Chinese, but it's actually American. If you went to China right now, probably now it would be different, but 30, 40 years ago, and you went out to China and you wanted to take something home, which I think may have been a foreign idea even to them back then, but they didn't have little boxes and stuff for you to put that in. Do you know where those were invented? In San Francisco. Yeah. So the Chinese takeout boxes that we know are actually American, just like the accordion is. We think of the accordion being an Italian thing, but it actually is instrument of San Francisco, is the accordion, because it was invented there. So, yeah, so nothing could be more American than takeout Chinese food. But the great thing about the Chinese takeout food and why it works so well as a composition is because when we put together compositions that are themes like that, you've got to look for things that integrate to make a composition. Now, in my workshops up in Mount Shasta, I've got 12 keys to producing a really great painting, both in the studio and plein air painting. And we've set up our workshops now up in Mount Shasta, where we're going to take apart every one of these themes, every one of these keys, all 12 keys, into separate divisions. And each workshop is going to be broken into each individual division of the 12 keys. And one of the 12 keys is composition. And part of that composition conversation is part of what we're going to be working with in here. It will be part of one of our weekend workshops up there. And for you guys, if you want to go take the weekend workshop, it will be the third weekend in May, the third weekend in June, the third weekend in September, and the third weekend in October. So that's how we kind of are structuring all of our workshops. So if you want to kind of plan a date, ideally, it would be great to do both the spring and fall workshop, or both 2 workshops in the spring, because with each workshop we're going to be highlighting different ideas into our 12 keys, so that you can develop and learn those things as you go along. We started already with the composition, but we're going to go into depth. But yet, some of the things that we'll discuss will actually be stuff that we do in this class. So in this class, you'll have an opportunity to kind of play around with those ideas, but just understand that in context to all of the other things, you're just going to get a little bite out of what we're doing. The 12 Baumann keys to creating great works of art. The Baumann keys, 12 of them. I had actually stopped at 11, and then I thought, 11's so strange, I need to invent another one. And you know how I am, I love to invent. So I actually found a 12th one, and it actually is an important key. Who knows, maybe by the summer I'll have 13, but no, I think 12 is good. Anyway, with the 12 keys, one of the keys is putting together a composition. And Chris has asked me, okay, so what does that mean? And it's interesting because when I focus on an idea like that, I myself do research. And so I spent a lot of time looking at a lot of the artists that have produced books. Edgar Payne is one of the artists that produced the composition book and stuff. And a lot of those old books, they would have composition. They would say, okay, in a composition, let's see if we have a pen here that's working. But in a composition, you might have an L shape. And this primarily means that you would have like a tree here, and maybe a lake here, and then maybe some little mountain back there. So that would be an L-shaped composition. So in the same space, you might have an O composition. And that's where you will have a tree on the side here, and the tree might bend this way. And then you might have some other trees over here, and then you'd have a mountain over here, and then you'd have some drifting clouds over here. So that would be like an O-shaped composition. This is old school ideas here. Okay, so then you might have an H composition. And why they gave everything an alphabet, I have no idea. But here again too, you might have something, this is kind of something that we're going to discuss today, but we're going to actually end up with symmetry. So we're going to have a symmetry where everything's kind of centered, which gives the thing symmetry. It's been a long weekend. Give me a So symmetry. So what we're trying to do, symmetry is great because what it does is it provides power, and where things are like equal on both sides. Now the whole thing, and you can, they go on and on. There's like pages and pages and pages of all these. You have like an M composition, S composition, like this, you know, and you know, when you decide to do one of these things, this could be like a pathway or a road, you know, that leads you in. You can combine an S and an L. Although I don't think there's S and M, but that's a whole nother conversation. So anyway, so you can combine those. But anyway, and when you actually start thinking about it, almost every letter of the alphabet, you know, if you want to do an A, which is what we're going to kind of do, that's like a pyramid. So anyway, so there's all these different ideas, but yet, how does that really apply to anything with painting? Well, when we're thinking about composition, the main important thing about the composition is this. This here has everything to do with composition. And the whole idea of a composition is how do you fill this up? And what are you trying to create in here? Now, we've talked about the law of thirds, where you break a canvas up into thirds. And then a third, and a third, okay? And that's how a lot of photographers, and that's how a lot of painters start off with. In fact, that's usually where a lot of artists actually stop. And in the thirds, you might have a foreground here, and then a lake, and then some mountains, or yeah, however you want to, or these could be mountains in here, and this could be a lake. And mainly, if you fall everything into thirds, the composition should pretty much work. You put a tree here, you put center focal points here. Now, the whole idea of putting together a composition is to have a central focal point, which we've talked about before, but we'll actually be talking a little bit more in depth in another conversation. But right now, I'm just talking about the main structure, and that's kind of what we're talking about, is the structure of a composition. So the next one would be the golden mean, and that's where we divide everything by 1.618. And so we divide the length by 1.618, and we keep on dividing that. You end up with that, and you end up with that, and it gets smaller and smaller. And then you flip it backwards, and you get that measurement. And I have a whole YouTube video on that if you wanted to learn that. And then the same thing over here is 1.618. And you end up with a grid. Now, the issue with most people is that when they're copying a painting or setting up a still life, you're trying to figure out, how do I make this work as a still life? And it's difficult to take that still life and put it into this formula and make it work. Because we kind of go with the idea that we paint what we see. But when you actually become an artist, you do paint what you see, but that's so limiting. And it also kind of can create a painting that's relatively stiff. So an artist will actually take a still life, like something very similar to our Chinese takeout meal here, and we might set it up. But in the process of setting it up, we're aware that we're going to use either the law of thirds, or we're going to pay attention to do a golden mean setup. But the things might not necessarily want to set up in a still life that way. Or you're working on that still life and you think, I need to do something with this. Now, when I'm talking about putting together a composition, the first thing you want to do is think about consideration. There's no real rule in setting up a composition. There's supposedly a lot of do nots, like do not set anything in the center, don't have anything in the middle. Those things, there's a lot of things that you're not supposed to do. But are they really rules, or are they just suggestions? And if you get that everything you do is just a suggestion, then anything that you're actually going to paint actually can be moved and changed and fit into a structure. And that's what we're doing, is we're basing some kind of structure. And within that structure, anything can happen. And just the slight movement of shapes or forms can alter the reaction that the viewer has. So by taking a line and pointing it this way, could lean a viewer out of the picture. But if you take that same line and tilt it this way, it can actually keep the viewer in the picture. So when we're talking about composition, we're talking about almost everything that's in that space contributing eventually to the central focal point. Now, when we're talking about central focal point, that's really the spot that is the most important part of the painting, and you guys know that I just beat that to death. Like, a painting without a central focal point is worthless. And the homework assignment that we did up on Thursday up in Reading, one of the students, Wednesday in Reading, she did a long, narrow painting, which is really, really difficult to pull off. It was pomegranates and Indian corn. And she designed it. She's just growing like crazy. She's becoming a master before my eyes. But she has got this composition down to the point, like I said, it's really long, so it's like this. And in that space, here, her central focal point on the pomegranate was about that big. I'm not kidding. That's it. The whole painting came down to one spot. And I asked the class, so where's the central focal point? And everybody stood up and pointed to that one spot. And it was just a little highlight on the edge of a pomegranate that's been broken open in the little yellow spot. And the light just came through. And she had Indian corn and pomegranates in here and all this stuff. And the whole thing came right down to that. And that's a choice you make. Remember I would say that central focal points are not created. You choose them. And the difference between choice and deciding, a lot of people decide on a central focal point. You know what the word decide comes from? Decide comes from homicide, suicide, pesticide. It means to kill off. It's from Greek, and it means to kill off. So when you're deciding something, you're actually deciding whether or not you want something. It's almost wishy-washy. If I decide I'm going to go to the gym tomorrow, it's like, that means I decide to go, but if something comes up that's a lot better, I'll do that instead. So deciding is not really very powerful. That's why I always be very careful on the words that I choose. And when I'm choosing a central focal point, I choose one. Just like if I'm going to go to the gym, I choose tomorrow to go to the gym, which means that out of all of my options, I choose one. And I state it, I don't decide to go to the gym, I choose to go to the gym. Center focal point is that you look at that and you say, I choose that to be my central focal point. Not because it's better because of the way I set up my lighting, or better because that's where I put my gum wrapper or whatever you're painting and it's white. You know, and it's the only thing that the light's hitting. You don't do that. You say, I'm going to put together a composition, and I choose that wherever I want my central focal point, it will be right there. And a lot of times that will be actually in the center of that, either the golden mean or the law of thirds. It will be within this area. You don't want to have your central focal point out here, per se, because what happens is that it's out of our central view. But does that mean it's wrong? No. You can actually have a central focal point out there.
But your eyes will always lean to the...
Your lines always lean to the center. But the thing is, if you have a central focal point out there, you can actually create eye magnets to bring the viewer. And that's what she had actually done with her still life, is that she created eye magnets. All the corn husks and everything pointed downwards, and then the pomegranate was here, and then the table edge and all that, and then the the corn was leaning this way with the husk, and she pulled it off. This thing was way off the center focal point. But it's not easy to do that. When we look at it through our eyes at life, normally, our central focal point is always in the middle. This is where we see. Okay. So when you pick up a camera and you point it at something, and remember that back in the day when we had cameras and you'd look through the thing, and a really high-end camera would have like little crosshairs in the center or a little square, and you would see a little point like that. Mm-hmm. And you would point it, I mean, automatically you would point it at whoever. So if I took a picture of Joan, I'd point that right at your nose. And if I wanted to take a picture of you, I would point it at your nose. Dead center, right between the eyes. Because we tend to look at eyes, so we go right in the middle. But then in the back of your head, at some point when you were 12, your mom said, don't put the thing, just go to the right or to the left. So what we do is we see like that, and we'll point the camera to that. And then because we were told better, we'll either move that over to the left or to the right. But it's not something that we do naturally. It's something we do because we think that's a better composition. Okay? So we will choose out of that. So that's how, and that's basically where everybody is normally. That's how the outside world thinks. That nothing's dead center, we throw it off to the side. That's going to be a good composition. That's a choice we make. So when you're putting together a composition, it's all about choices, where your central focal point will be. If you bring the central focal point out to the edge, out here, then it's about how are you going to get the rest of the painting to agree to that. And so what you do is you develop a structure. The structure is one of the elements of putting together a composition. And the structure can be the law of thirds, that would be a structure. Another structure would be the golden mean, which is what we have the measurements here for, where you would put in all the different lines. So let's just kind of quietly put kind of a suggestion of that. Wow. I wish my pens would always work this well, just to have just a fine little ghost line. Okay. So in the homework assignment of the Chinese takeout, the reason why I chose it is that you have one big element, which is your box. And then you have your fortune cookie, which most of your bags of Chinese takeout have. So you have your fortune cookie. So you might plot that onto your table, and it might just be resting there. And for your composition, it could be like, let's say you put the fortune cookie down here, and your box back in here. Well, the fortune cookie is now just sitting in the middle of your painting. And even though you can go up and move it, artistically you should be able to move that fortune cookie somewhere else if you chose it, without having to physically move it. Just because you guys are all master painters. So you might want to move that over to here, onto your structure, where your golden means come together. You might move your fortune cookie over there. So now you're not relying on your setup, you're actually making choices of how you're moving things around. And let's say when you threw all of your stuff up, let's just say here you've got your box over here. Now again, I'm putting the box in such a way that it's kind of resting on the golden mean, and I might even put the little handle on it, and I might even put that handle sitting right on the golden mean. Okay, now that might be part of my setup, or I might just move my setup on my painting a little over. Remember, the reason why you're painting from life is so that you can see highlights and shadows and textures and things like that. But if we just end up painting what we see and not have any influence as an artist in making decisions, then we're not really artists, we're actually just duplicating copiers. We're just like a photograph, okay? So the whole idea is to develop a structure of some kind and then move elements around to make that work. And a lot of times your structure is something that you choose at the beginning. Is it going to be a law of thirds painting? Is it going to be a golden mean painting? Is it going to be a pyramid painting? Is it going to have, because there's lots of different ways that artists over the years have put together these structures, but it's always something. One of the things that people like subconsciously are lines that repeat themselves. Things that are in the painting that are predictable. So certain angles in a painting, like if we tilt, let's say if we wanted to tilt, and I'm going to tilt it this way just because I know compositionally, but let's just say we want to tilt the handle of that basket this way. Okay, it might be presented up, but I might choose, rather than having it go straight up and down, which kind of feels a little stiff, I tilt that little top of that box so that the little metal handle tilts inward. Okay, and this tilt here, I might duplicate on the edge of my fortune cookie. So I might remove my fortune cookies so this angle here and this angle here are similar. I might even choose to put one of the angles of my chopsticks in there, or similar varying. Or to counteract that, I might move my chopsticks this way, and then look for putting something in this way. So I'm ending up putting in 2 lines this way, 2 lines this way. And this could be, let's say, the bag that it comes in. Okay, so usually a paper bag, and you might have a handle in there. But the bag here ends up pulling the same angle as my chopsticks. And I might even lay 2 chopsticks next to each other like that. So I've got this line and this line. These lines point to this line. This line points to this line. This line points to this one. This points back in. So what's in a fortune cookie? A fortune. So this might be really crude, so I might decide to put the fortune across the stick there to help break that line, and also give me an eye magnet to move me into the painting. Okay, so I'm jumping over. All these subliminal thoughts come into putting together composition, but it's not necessarily something that you do when you're setting it up. It's ideal if you become really good and you can do that. But a lot of times what happens with paintings is that you don't see a good idea until you're with it. And once you're with a good idea, then it actually starts your creativity. Now remember how the Greeks used to believe that your genius would come in. So you would be down in the studio working, and at some point, all of a sudden you forget that you're painting. It's like somebody else has taken over, and you're thinking about loves that have gone away, and times when you were happier and single, and stuff like that. And all of a sudden, your painting starts to just kind of erupt by itself, and you're kind of like almost watching somebody else paint. And you can almost go, no, put more shadow over there. And surprisingly, your hand is like doing these things. That's when your subliminal mind kind of takes over. And that's when it's awesome. But the Greeks used to call that genius. It's actually a ghost would come into the room and then kind of guide you. And a lot of Chinese art is based on, and Japanese art too, is based on the fact that you don't control it. You're actually just a vehicle for the gods to communicate through. In fact, the way you even hold Chinese brushes is you hold them upwards to the heavens so that the gods can hold onto the brush and tell you where to go. So the whole idea behind putting together composition is putting together something that is moving, pleasing, is based on some structure, having a good idea. A lot of times you have to play around with your subject matter to make it work. But to have some kind of concept or idea ahead of time of what you want to do. And what I want to do in the next few weeks is actually play around with different structures. So I'm going to come up with a structure and have you guys figure it out. Come up with something that works that way. The whole idea behind putting these objects in is that you should be able to move them or add things in based on the structure, based on the idea, based on the concept, and have the painting work more as a mathematical project rather than a haphazard one that you kind of threw everything together and made it work. just by changing angles, moving objects, putting them where it's best to put together a composition. Hopefully you come up with a little bit more of an interesting painting. Like I said, with the Chinese takeout, what's really great is that you have soy sauce bottles, little containers with dipping sauce, you know, and a lot of those things, you know, and I was a little disappointed because, you know, even a broken fortune cookie, you can end up being a wonderful eye magnet because you can have the main fortune cookie. Let's say, you know, here we have either the law of thirds or the golden mean. And here you have the fortune cookie, the main part of the fortune cookie here, broken, right? And then you could actually, where this golden mean comes together here, you'd have another golden mean that comes together here. You could actually put the other side of the fortune cookie over on this golden mean over here. So you have this piece of the fortune cookie that's broken over here, and then the little piece of it here, and then you can scatter little remnants of that along with your fortune, and even out here. So you end up with this wonderful line that leads you up into the painting, just by you scattering that around. There was another homework assignment where I had you guys put in something where I was really disappointed because nobody would actually scatter the mess around to try to get a little eye magnet happening. Remember what one that was? It was something where there was a lot of little pieces of something.
The packing peanuts or something?
The packing peanuts was one, and also the jacks.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I wanted to have actually the jacks, because you could how you stack the jacks could actually end up being an eye magnet. So, you know, so everything that you have like that. One of the homework assignments, they did something, and I said, put a ribbon in. You know, like a, and so the one homework, I said, okay, I want you to do this and this and this, and I want you to put a ribbon in. So what they did was that they had whatever they were doing, and I think it was like a gourd. I think it was a gourd, something like that. And then they would stick a ribbon. It's like some people are just so.
Chicken wire.
Chicken, yeah, that was another one. Now the reason why I had you do chicken wire, this class did, everybody kind of did well with the chicken wire because it was so dead. But the thing is, they had like this, and there was a gourd or something, and then I said, put some wire in. I mean, put in a ribbon.
A ribbon.
So they ended up putting in a ribbon like this. I'm going, what's that? And I said, well, you put a ribbon. And I go, really? I had one person do a ribbon like this, you know, like leaning up against the thing. And I'm going, you don't get it. Why did I ask you to do a ribbon?
Sometimes our minds cannot think.
Well, that's why I'm here. See, I can teach you to paint, but I can't teach you to be an artist. But I can wake up your mind.
Exactly. Like
Wake up!
I love it.
Wake up! So I said, you know, I have you know, if you watch my TV show, every once in a while, you'll see I'm opening up a drawing book. You know, and it's you know, it's my sketchbook. And on my sketchbook, I've got like 6 ribbons, silk ribbons, that are like 3 feet long. And it's like it's this wonderful package that I open up. It's like, you know, all these multicolored lines. Why? Why not? Why would you settle for just a little piece of ribbon? I mean, if I'm asking you to do ribbon, that's a wonderful eye magnet to stitch your painting in. A ribbon doing something like this, that comes into the painting like this, goes underneath an object, comes back out, wraps around the figure here. So now you've created the viewer some pathway in here. You could take the ribbon back out and go around this way and wrap the ribbon around up against the wall. What are you doing? You're creating eye magnets, things to keep the viewer in here. The kiss of death is anything that points out of the painting.
Yeah.
And the kiss of death is not having any movement in your painting. And why do you want movement? Because you want to lead everybody to your central focal point, whatever that is. Now, when we're talking about the golden mean, so in the golden mean, you have this, and again, if you need the measurements for this, you can go on to my YouTube video where I talk about this. Okay? But in this golden mean, you find the Fibonacci circle or spiral. Okay? And that's the spiral that goes like this. It comes all the way through. And all these line up right on a mean. Come down, come back up, go around, all find their means, all come around in here, and they come around, and it's actually a little bit more even like that. But you get a shape that's like this, okay, that crosses all the means. And that's the same kind of spiral that you have in a nautilus shell. Okay? And then this here, if you had a nautilus shell, this would be your central focal point. And so what artists used to do, and the old violins were based on this, and in fact even cell phones are based on this design. And you know the old iPods, the music? This line that came across there on the screen was actually on the golden mean. But artists would actually design this structure. Remember, we're talking about structure. And then wherever this landed, they would put their central focal point on there. Right in that corner there. So, and then they would base everything in that painting to go to that point. Everything would point to this point. So if you had a gourd, the gourd would lay in and the neck of the gourd would point upwards. Here you would have possibly a sheet of music that was leaning towards this, and this line would go take you up into there, and who knows what this would have been up there. But they would have purposely moved everything around to fit the structure and have a pleasing painting. One line out of place, and the viewer subconsciously knows it. I had at one point, in my early days, I still do it once in a while, because I think subliminal stuff is great. So we'll go like this, and we'll go like this. This is again the golden mean. I'm just very quickly. I wish I had something permanent on here that I didn't have to dig around with it. But back in the day, I would actually think about even doing like a half dome painting, and I have that comes to mind because this is what I did. When you do something crazy, that's what you remember. You know, think about your childhood. The things that were crazy, you go, oh my God, I can't believe I survived that. And still at times you think, ooh, get the willies. But you know, sometimes when you do stuff on your paintings, you can kind of go crazy. So I remember I was doing it like a half dome painting. So the half dome was here, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but it's like half dome was here, and then I put Mirror Lake in here and all this stuff. And I put the trees in, and you know, on the golden mean. And so like I would have a tree here, and the tree would end at a golden mean, and it was on a golden mean. And since as you get smaller, these golden means get smaller. So I'd have another tree on a golden mean, and then another tree on a golden mean, and as they stack up, they get closer and closer, which is, you know, and rhythmically, remember that every one of these shapes here mimics this overall shape. Remember how when we started I said this is your most important thing in composition, is to know where your stage is. That's the most important. Well, when you do the golden mean, you end up with exact duplicates constantly throughout the painting that are exactly the same proportions as your overall canvas. So those subliminal lines are important when you base your composition together. And so putting a tree here, and a tree here, and a tree here, and a tree here, subconsciously with people's minds, it feels like it's all order without having it look like, oh my God, it's just all the same. Okay, so it does throw it off. Then I had my central focal point, you know, it was on half dome, but it was the light on half dome. And the light on half dome was again in my middle third section somewhere. Okay? So that's my middle thirds, and then here's half dome here. God, You'd never guess that I painted this thing a million times. But anyway, so here's Half Dome in here. So the light on the wall would be my central focal point. Remember, central focal point should be an effect, not a thing. Some people would make Half Dome as a central focal point. No, mine is the light hitting the Half Dome. And it could be very easily done by just putting in thin light, kind of subdued light, going to hard light. So you would have a lighter, harder, and then ba-dum. So that even the transition from nothing to something is really powerful. It creates some movement. And that's how light works. So I had the center focal point. And then what I did was I drew this. Because I remember going into head shops when I was little, in the 60s in the Haight-Ashbury, they would have these posters that, you know, especially as little kids, because I was probably, 14 or 13, no, it's in the 70s when I was, anyway, probably 12. But you look at those posters, and I guess they're even better when you're high, but, but they swirl, and they keep your attention, right? And I thought, wow, if I could really do that with my paintings, that would be really cool. And the people would stand there and kind of have this kind of feeling like they can't go away, Imagine getting vertigo when people look at your painting. It's a lot better than just having it sit there. Okay? So then what I would do is I would take these trees and I would put branches and things on there, and I would put a dead tree that was over here. I'd make sure that the edge of my mountain would be on this swirl. I would make sure that the bottom of Half Dome would be on this swirl. I would put in cracks in the rocks that way. I would have water that would fall. So this line here would follow this line, that would follow this line, that would follow this line. And I would purposely manipulate my landscape to have all these lines. And if I would do a still life, I would manipulate, if I have a stick or a twig out here, I would move it in artistic when I was painting it. So it would fit my structure, keeping the idea all compact like that. Now imagine if you could pull that off. That would be extraordinary. People would get this incredible feeling that they can't get their eyes off of your canvas. See, that's an idea. That's the difference between deciding what you want to paint and choosing something to paint. Basing it into a composition that has structure that you chose or made up, something. It's sure better than just sticking everything willy-nilly and kind of throwing your hands up saying, I'm a victim, oh, I can't paint. So the whole idea is to be able to put in the structure. So this week's homework assignment, and then we'll go over our thing, is that I'm going to give you a structure. And so this structure this week, I'm dictating it as the pyramid structure. And I'm not going to tell you what the homework assignment is yet. But what we want to do is we want to try to make sure that we have symmetry. So what I really want to do is I want to really play off the rules that we're told to break. So we're going to throw away the whole idea that never put anything in the center. I don't know who told us that because that's so natural. But putting something central into a painting is powerful. When you look at government buildings, you have, everything is just organized. Everything is symmetrical. If you look at the Taj Mahal, it's all based on symmetry. Okay? So this time what we're going to do is we're going to base a composition, so whatever our composition is, and we're going to be changing this as we go along. But remember, you're going to manipulate your composition to fit this. So whatever you have to do to make the objects fit, make them smaller, make them bigger, make them longer, whatever you're going to do. But you're going to create a structure based on a pyramid. Now the pyramid structure has been around forever. In fact, a lot of Leonardo da Vinci's paintings are based on that. Paintings of Madonna and some of the other ones. So you have that. So you have this structure here. It doesn't mean that everything has to go directly. So you're going to have whatever objects I'm going to tell you to do, you'll have to fit them in such a way. Now the whole idea behind doing this well is to hide what you've done. At the end, we shouldn't be really aware of how you chose, okay? The next part of this homework assignment is I'm going to give you a shape. Okay, and you guys might want to take a picture of that. It's just a structure that I decided for you. It's an eye magnet. It's an eye magnet of some kind that however you can put into your painting, it could be a vine, it could be a series of things that line up, but you're going to use this structure to try to compose your homework assignment this week.
This specific one?
Yeah.
And then the focal point will be right in.
It's wherever you choose it. Your focal point can be anywhere. Your objects can be anywhere. The whole idea is that what I want is a shape that kind of feels like it weeds itself around. Now, it doesn't have to be continuous. You could have something that comes down like this and then is picked up down here, points in, and you could have something that ends up here and carries this way. Okay? This can be a little bit shorter. This could lead you to a central focal point in here or off to the side. But all in all, this is the overall shape that we're all going to work with.
We better take a picture.
Yeah, so you could take a picture of that, or you could just... So we're going to do with... And this is a structure. The structure is the pyramid structure. And then this is just an eye magnet to help you weave in and out of that. And whatever you end up putting into that will be choices.
Yeah.
Mary Ellen's picture that she's working on, the still life, she's working on this concept. So, and I even pointed out to her, she has a table for her still life that's like this. And all of her objects are on there. She has a tie that's actually hanging off the wall that comes down in here. That gives her the symmetry there. She's got a saxophone in here that's laying in there. She's got photos that she's got on the wall. It's very, very similar to what we see here. So when you have a structure, you move the objects in and around and move it and see if you can get a concept going. And remember, the first thing you need for the painting is a concept. And the concept is the idea. But you need a structure to put it into. So what we're discussing is structure. And then next week I'll give you another structure to work with. And remember, these are things that we're going to be taking apart in our workshops. So if you want to come to the workshops, it's the third weekend in May, third weekend in June, third weekend in September, third weekend in October.
Mother's Day, right?
I don't know. If it's Mother's Day, I guarantee you will have more fun in my workshop than you will at Mother's Day. I'll actually give you roses and take you out to dinner. Something like that, yeah. But if Mother's Day falls in or Father's Day, you'll get far bigger present. In fact, you could say, you know, for Mother's Day, I want to go do this workshop.
That would be great. We should.
That'd be an idea. Okay?